Hello everybody, this is B Harper from supermarcy.com and welcome back to another book review. Today I will be looking at Anne Rice's standalone feature, The Mummy. And right there is basically my verdict of this book. It, quite frankly, is one of my favourite of Anne Rice's novels that she's ever written. That's not to put down the Vampire Chronicles or the Mayfair Witches trilogy by any means. But when it comes to stories that stand on their own 2 feet and don't rely upon any other resource, The Mummy is undoubtedly one of her most masterfully crafted tales. So before I go into the particulars of this book, and by the way, this review is completely spoiler-free, so please don't feel I'm going to give away any sort of crucial detail that may impede your enjoyment of this book. I would never do that. Never, ever, ever. Okay. So, yeah, allow me to read the back blurb here, and then we'll go into the review itself. Here we go. Ramses the Great has reawakened in opulent Edwardian London. Having drunk the elixir of life, he is now Ramses the Damned, doomed forever to wander the earth, desperate to quell hungers that can never be satisfied. He becomes the close companion of a voluptuous heiress, Julie Stratford, but his cursed past again propels him towards disaster. He is tormented by searing memories of his last reawakening at the behest of Cleopatra, his beloved Queen of Egypt, and his intense longing for her, undiminished over the centuries, will force him to commit an act that will place everyone around him in the gravest danger. That's pretty much all you really need to know about what propels this book forward, but as per Anne Rice's voluptuous fashion of storytelling, it falls more back onto the characters. For example, when it comes to her writing very strong and independent female individuals, Anne Rice is very, very good at it. And you wouldn't think so because most of her female characters usually end up in some sort of jeopardy. And quite frankly, there's a couple of her characters that end up being very controversial, i.e. Claudia the child vampire from the Vampire Chronicles. She is very much a figure of, ambiguity. Like, some people say that she based it on her unborn child, and other people say that it's some sort of postpartum depression type of thing that she was working through. But the fact remains, when Anne Rice writes a fantasy, she has a very distinct sense of the female gaze, and I'm fairly certain you know what that is, but the female gaze is pretty much the feminine equivalent of the male gaze, and we all know what that is. But the way she writes, she doesn't try to be particularly intrusive upon either sex's senses. She manages to find a way to sort of make her writing egalitarian when it comes to addressing the sensuous nature of her writings. This is essentially what a Universal Mummy movie would have been if it had sex and violence and another sort of sense of story and purpose to it. Of course, that's not to put down any of what Universal did, with Boris Karloff and Christopher Lee and everything, but I personally would love to see this book being adapted for the screen. It's got some really heavy detail, it's just very beautifully crafted, and the characters, like I said, are the crucial elements that help this story pop. For example, the titular Ramses the Damned. He is, once again, another sort of tragic immortal individual. He's not necessarily on the verge of depression that, say, Louis from Interview with the Vampire was, but Ramses has been around for a very long time. He has seen a whole lot of crap. And he's done a whole lot of crap. And he is carrying this baggage as he's going in and out through these millenniums and meeting all these different people. And in particular, his interactions with Julie Stratford, the heiress that he comes into very close contact with. This is pretty much a high-flying romance. High-flying, gothic, melodramatic romance. And you may turn up your nose at melodrama, but personally, I love it. This is what helps make a story exciting. Yes, it's basic. Yes, it, in a sense it does pander. But it's all down to the execution and how you perceive the characters. Julie here is yet another one of those really strong women, but also very vulnerable to romance. And when it comes to Ramses, Julie just can't keep it. She just can't keep it locked down. She tries. And here's another thing. Julie is one of those modern women that were around in Edwardian England. Like, this was when you know, the suffrage was starting to sort of, you know, take place, and women were starting to realise that their role in society went beyond, you know, being baby-making machines. And Julie reflects that. She is very much a product of her time. She's unconventional, she's witty, she's clearly intelligent, and, you know, when she kicks it off with Ramses, you can see that this is a romance earned. It's not like Bella and Edward, it's not like Anastasia and Christian Grey. This stuff is on equal level in more ways than one. And it's not just the heroes in this book that make it really good too. You have the villainous character of Henry, who is Julie's cousin. He is not a nice man by any means of the imagination. He's a gambler, he's a shyster, he's a drinker, he's abuser of women, and you know, he's also a psychopath. Henry is a huge psychopath, and even though his role is not over-exaggerated in this book when it comes to exploring how he thinks, you get just enough to see that this guy is not playing on the right field. He never has. Well, whatever chance of innocence and redemption he has had, it is long gone by the time this book starts. So he is straight up the villain, but when it comes to villains and when you see his insecurities, he's not strictly one note. Which brings me to the character of Cleopatra. By the way, once again, I'm not going to give anything away, because to me to do that would be a crime. But the way Cleopatra is incorporated into the story, let's put it this way, if you think that Ramses has issues, given that he has drunk the elixir of life and he has experienced and done all these horrible things, what would you imagine an undead Cleopatra to be? The mind boggles. I love this book. Going over to other details, as per typical Anne Rice fashion, she knows the period of which she's writing for. Edwardian England was a very fascinating place because technology was starting to become a huge factor. And around this same time, Egyptology was the talk of the town. People wanted artifacts. They were constantly travelling to Egypt and going all these family trips that would usually last about like a year or so abroad. It was a huge, huge thing, and this was when the Curse of the Mummy was starting to sort of, you know, circulate around the town, and all these myths and legends were starting to sort of make their way into newspapers and into the public consciousness. It was a fun time. I'm being partly sarcastic when I say that, but all the same. Anne Rice really knows how to imbue the worlds that she creates with a sense of realism. And yes, this is, in the end, a supernatural romance/thriller, but that doesn't mean there can't be some significant grounding in reality. There is actually a lot of references to archaeology, and that's something that I personally have a vested interest in because I have a degree in archaeology myself. So when these things are mentioned in the novel, however in passing and, you know, in particularly vague detail, I can still appreciate these things, and I remember thinking, hey, I actually know what this is. I know what they're talking about. You know, it's, yeah, useless detail about me. What are you going to do? So at the end of the day, this is undoubtedly a really, really good book. It's very fast to read as well, even though it is somewhat epic in its scope and a lot of stuff is happening all at once. It goes by at a very quick clip, like there is no sort of slowing down once this tale gets started. Believe you me on that. So as a final verdict, I would give The Mummy a 4.5 out of 5 quite easily. The only reason why I take away that little point was that, here's the thing, this book ends on a cliffhanger, okay? And so far, Miss Rice has not found a way to continue this tale. And I'm just thinking, Anne, why did you do that? If you really have no intention of, you know, following up, you know, what happens at the end of this book, why did you leave a cliffhanger? You said that Ramses would return. It actually says at the end of this book here. Let me find it. It says, and I quote, "The adventures of Ramses the Damned shall continue." There's been no continuation. Why? But look, other than that, even if you're not necessarily a fan of Anne Rice herself, there is no doubt you will find a lot of fun when you read this book. Like I said, it has no ties to the Vampire Chronicles. It makes no mention of any of her previous books that she had written before. This is completely, you know, solo. This is standing its own solidarity and its own sort of dimension altogether. So, most highly recommended, and yeah, you will have a really good time, especially when it comes to mentioning of embalmment. And as usual, guys, thank you so much for listening to me, and as per usual, I shall see you in the next video. Bye bye for now.